The trade dispute between the United States and China rumbles on, with Beijing being hit with a wave of new sanctions, and Washington faces a possible retaliation. Eyes are on how this could affect the global market, including South Korean firms. Our trade correspondent Moon Hye-ryeon joins us in the studio to tell us more. Welcome, Hye-ryeon.
Good evening, Jung-min.
Evening. Tell us about the new developments and why these new measures have been introduced.
Right, Jung-min. So last week, the Biden administration announced a series of different tariffs for a number of different Chinese imports. And just last night, it announced that some of these new regulations will take effect starting in August. The new measures are expected to affect some $18 billion in imported Chinese goods, including electric vehicles, steel and aluminium, solar cells and minerals and batteries. Trade tariffs on EVs from China are being quadrupled from 25% to 100%, and chips face a doubling of the duties already in place to 50%.
Because we're not going to let China flood our market, making it impossible for American auto manufacturers to compete fairly. We're also implementing a 25% tariff on electric vehicle batteries from China and a 25% tariff on critical minerals that make those batteries. Folks, look.
So the White House said that the reasons for these new measures are to check China's unfair trade practices that are threatening American businesses, but with very few Chinese EVs actually being sold in the American market due to vehicle tariffs already in place, it's mostly being seen as more of a political move. And that's not all. The following day, the U.S. government also announced that it will introduce regulations for Chinese-made connected vehicles, which are those that are able to exchange information wirelessly, such as smart cars, with autonomous driving and vehicles with wireless navigation software. Washington expects to have a rollout this fall over concerns about personal data getting back to Beijing.
Hye-ryeon, how is this expected to affect South Korean firms? Which industries are likely to be most affected?
Right, so far there's been some mixed responses from the South Korean market, with some sectors expecting to be not as affected as others as a result of these new measures. So for example, take the chip industry. Memory chips produced by domestic firms Samsung Electronics and SK Hynix already account for more than half of the global market share. So they're not expected to be as affected by these tariff hikes. However, it's more complicated for other industries such as the EV sector, as it could go either way. With higher tariffs on Chinese-produced vehicles, domestic companies could take advantage of this gap in the American market. And this trend has already been seen in South Korea's exports lately, with data from the Bank of Korea showing that the value of outbound shipments to the U.S. overtook those to China for the first time in 21 years in the first quarter of the year. But one expert says that as this is only temporary, because Washington seeks domestic production of goods.
Until the construction of those factories are complete, Korean firms may be able to export more to the United States, but once those factories come online, Korean companies may lose their advantage in the American market.
And another factor that needs to be taken into account is how it could affect markets outside of the U.S.
Chinese companies will not be able to sell in the United States or sell less in the United States. They will divert those exports to third markets like Europe or other Asian countries.
So this could lead to South Korean firms facing much tougher competition in these markets, especially for the steel industries. For companies such as POSCO and Hyundai Steel, that will have to compete with the much cheaper Chinese steel.
Well, in that case, what's the response from the government and how are they planning to prepare for these possible impacts going forward?
Right, so for the time being, the South Korean government is responding to and monitoring the situation through close communication with industry officials and Washington. So last month, South Korea submitted a statement to the U.S. Department of Commerce to express its concerns regarding the uncertainty around how the country's firms could be affected. And over the past few days, the country's trade ministry has called a series of meetings with both experts and industries to examine the possible ramifications and collect insider opinions. During a meeting with the automobile battery industries last Thursday, the government pledged its support for diversifying supply chains in the industry and that it will continue to closely monitor Beijing's response to these measures. On Friday, the Trade Ministry also consulted major domestic steel companies to hear what measures need to be implemented in order to raise the competitiveness of the domestic industry. And as for the semiconductor industry, the presidential office stated that it was currently reviewing means to provide direct subsidies to chip companies instead of providing tax support measures.
Okay, thanks for the report today, Hye-ryeon.
Thank you for having me.